Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon. I'm happy for us to start our webinar. This is actually the third webinar in a series of 3 under the Africa Dialogue series for 2023. And our sub-theme today is Digital Service Trade, Great Potential, but regulatory frameworks are urgent. My name is Stephen Karinge, and I'm the Director for Regional Integration and Trade at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. As you had seen from the concept note, this webinar has been put together with the AFCFTA Secretariat, the Office of Special Advisor on Africa, the permanent representative to the African Union to UN in New York, and ourselves, Economic Commission for Africa. So I want to thank all of you who are joining us today, and I hope that you find good linkages with the previous sessions that you have attended. And I also want to thank the panelists whom I'll be introducing as we continue. So for now, we are going to listen to our principals, the 3 institutions that have put this together, starting with Ms. Cristina Duarte, the UN Undersecretary General and the Special Advisor on Africa, followed by Mr. Antonio Pedro, the Acting Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, and then Ms. Emily Jerry Mboro Doria, the Director of Trading Services, Investment, IPR, and Digital Trade at the AFCFTA Secretariat. So we have 3 minutes for each one of you. Cristina, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Stefan. Good morning, my dear brothers, sisters, colleagues, friends, you name it. So let me see if I can deliver in 3 minutes. I need to tell you as a previous note. I'm going to use this opportunity to take a political economy angle, because I think is missing in this journey, in this technological journey in Africa. But of course, I'd like to thank my dear Antonio Pedro. Muito obrigada, Antonio Pedro, for teaming up to deliver this, as well as the Continental Free Trade Area. Of course, you are delivering the Africa Dialogue series, the 30-day program, together with my dear sister Ambassador Fatima, the permanent observer, the permanent representative of the African Union in New York. As you said, Stefan, the theme of our webinar is Digital Service Trade, Great Potential, but regulatory frameworks are urgent, which means if they are urgent, it's because they are missing. You need to understand why they are missing. Why they are missing. Allow me very quickly, from an historical standpoint, what happened in the 70s? In the 70s, we all Africans saw the death, this is the word, the death of the independence vision. Policymaking in Africa has understood that achieving development is limited to managing poverty. That happened, that conceptual shift happened in the 70s. So what we saw in the 70s was a shift from the industrialization agenda that was very clear in the 60s Independence Declaration to towards that of poverty reduction as a major, and this shift, in my opinion, is the major contributor for the economic malaise of our continent. So what happened? The development agenda globally shift to the lowest common denominator. Until now, managing poverty as opposed to socioeconomic transformation. And everybody is connected on this. This is the reason, and I will try to explain quickly, that as today, we're still struggling in putting in place, let's say, strong regulatory frameworks for digital transformation. So in order to break this cycle, this shift to the lowest common denominator, and to generate economic growth that leads to sustainable development, I would like to remind everybody that from 2000 to 2015 or 2020, Africa enjoyed very strong economic growth rates. They did not deliver sustainable development, they did not deliver resilience. And at any external shock, we are hit it very, very badly. So for that, for this breaking of the cycle to happen, digital has become an important piece in the equation. An important piece in the equation. So innovation has become a necessary component of any solution: food security, education, health, energy, you name it. Without digitization and digitalization, we are in a position not to deliver, it's amazing, not to deliver Agenda 2063. As simple as that. So, and the problem is that innovation, if you read the documents, official documents, in the past 20 years, is mentioned, is talked, has been debated, but not strategized, in my opinion. Not, we have been talking about innovation, digitalization, you name it, but not strategized. And this is a huge risk, Stefan and dear colleagues. Yeah. This narrow path might be placing Africa as a huge consumption market of hard and softwares imported, produced overseas, but not feeding economic transformation. So we need to realize that if you look back in the past 10 years, particularly that was very, very clear when addressing COVID-19 solutions, civil society seemed to be readier than policymakers. And despite the lack of policy enablers, the digital technology industry has grown in Africa, from incubators, startups, tech-ups, you name it. So ICT activities are spreading across the continent. And young Africans are not missing the opportunity, of course. But despite these, let's say, positive movements, the challenge remains.
Yeah, no. So I know if I let you
digitize. I'm about to finish, Stefan. I'm not to use my 3 minutes. Digitization is not widespread. And what is missing? What is missing? Scale. What is missing is scale, which means that in order to generate transformative growth, digitization and digitalization cannot continue being an effort promoted essential by civil society and private sector. Public policy needs to jump, and basically what I have been also has been advocated, we need to be conscious that we need to a bottom-up approach, which means civil society and private sectors are already there, but to accelerate this bottom-up approach, we need to build conducive environments. We need to activate in a massive way the top-down approach. Public policies, they need to jump in a strong way and to create conducive environments. So the 28 access rate to internet becomes much bigger, but more than that, we need to use that internet access to provide content. So socioeconomic transformation is delivered. Since you are already looking at me that my time is over, back to you, Stefan.
No, thank you so much, Christina, and thank you for starting us on that very high note. Let me pass the floor now to Antonio Pedro, the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa.
So, thank you very much. First, I fully agree with Christina about the need for us to go deep and interrogate on some of those foundational issues that are behind Africa's current position in the global economic order. And some of it, I mean, if you use the Secretary General's our common agenda language, really has to do with a little bit of more understanding of behavioral sciences, looking at nudges and what we need to introduce as systems so that and incentives in the system so that that ecosystem that we are talking of here can be then triggered. But let me go through the protocol. So, cara amiga, colega, Cristina Duarte, I'm the Secretary General, UN Special Advisor on Africa. Dear Ms. Emily Njeri Gloria, it's a pleasure to be at another interesting conversation with you after you've outshined us in Abu Dhabi during the annual investment meeting. Ambassador Fatima, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure to be here with you today. As everyone has been saying, trade in digital services has experienced rapid growth in recent years, including in Africa, and has become a crucial driver of inclusive sustained development. But it's really about scale. It's really about increasing the level of our ambition. Digital services served as a lifeline during COVID-19 pandemic. All of the platforms that we established from APEX, AVAT, and so on and so forth were enabled because of digital services. And these enable our economies to continue to function, notwithstanding the impacts of the lockdown measures that were, obtained in all of our countries. But whilst we celebrate these achievements, we also recognize that digital delivered services accounted for only a third of Africa's total services exports in 2021, in contrast to the global average of 60%. So that there's an opportunity there. And this is where I think our reflections today have become important. So this, we've also, there are the findings of our own recent research that suggests that the lack of an enabling policy environment for digital trade hinders Africa's exports and imports of digital services. This, of course, seems obvious, but it's important in all of these conversations for us to have the necessary data sets, evidence. Furthermore, the regulatory landscape across the continent, again, everyone has been saying, is fragmented. So our conversation today is really about industrial policy. And again, as you've been saying, industrial policy is not really about just the business of a Minister of Industry and Trade. It's a business of the entire system, the whole of government approach. And this is where some of the fragmentation is clear. While many countries are starting to take steps to develop necessary policies and regulations to govern digital technologies and facilitate digital trade and services, they find themselves at different stages and following different approaches. So this, of course, provides room for harmonization. And this is a call that we need to continue to make continuously again and again and again. A harmonized regulatory framework will play a crucial role in creating this elusive, conducive environment for Africa's digital trade and services. E-commerce and everything else that informs it will become a reality if we address these regulatory failures. The ongoing negotiations for the AFCFTA protocol on digital trade present, therefore, a key opportunity to establish such a harmonized regulatory framework for the continent. ECA, as many other partners, is supporting this process by collecting data on digital services trade restrictions, which can inform the negotiations. And beyond that, of course, we are mapping and profiling what is the constraints to trade overall in Africa. Our African Counter Business Index is one example of such endeavors. Research findings reveal that restrictions on cross-border data flows, along with limited data protection, have a particular detrimental impact on digital service trade in Africa. These two factors need to be addressed hand in hand, as relaxing restrictions on cross-border data transfer will only be feasible if a robust and reliable framework for data protection and privacy is in place. It is essential that consumers are protected when accessing the internet and conducting online transactions, including payments. Uganda serves as a positive example in this regard, as the country has successfully implemented legal frameworks for data privacy that cover online sales and electronic transactions. But we cannot live with isolated cases. We have to create a cohesive movement across the continent. So more countries in Africa need to emulate Uganda's of this. At the continental level, the AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, which was adopted in 2014, is of course a reference. However, it has only been ratified by 13 AU member states thus far. During the AU summit in February, we did indicate the importance of prioritizing this effort of ratification of protocols that are key to making CFTA work for Africa. So the ongoing negotiations for the CFTA protocol on digital trade present an opportunity to enhance the convention's effectiveness and to incentivize more countries to ratify. In concluding, I would like to highlight that Africa has some of the most rapidly growing markets and greatest entrepreneurial energy in the global economy. And Christina made reference to the creative energy that lies in our youth. It's really about creating the right environment to harness all of that potential, providing context-specific solutions in local language and beyond, so that everyone can benefit from the opportunity that is associated with e-commerce and digital trade. With the right policy frameworks, these factors can serve as ideal launching pads for innovation, job creation, and economic prosperity. It is imperative that we take the necessary steps, therefore, to ensure that the continent can fully harness this potential. Against this backdrop, I wish all participants productive discussions during today's webinar and look forward to an informative session. Thank you very much. I hope I've used my 3 minutes effectively. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Antonio, and thank you also for complimenting what Christina said, putting some practical things to it. So let's listen to Emily, who has this very important task of shepherding the negotiations together with the SG and the chair of the negotiating team. So Emily, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. As always, it's our pleasure, and I'm happy to be part of this meeting today. Glad to have the Undersecretary with us, and also DG Lasina Kone, our chairperson for the Committee on Digital Trade, Mr. Rafael Mezui-Minsa, and other friends who are also here, and as the acting ES for UNECA said, Mr. Antonio. Yes, we had a good meeting last week in Abu Dhabi, and we also before that had a very good meeting with Smart Africa, transforming digital transformation in Victoria Falls. So there is a lot that is going on, and definitely truly digital trade is at the center of everybody's talk and messages right now. So this is really an opportune time, and this meeting comes at a very good time. So let me go straight to use my 3 minutes wisely and go to the speech that that is before me. And this is, of course, on behalf of His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the AFCFTA Secretary General, who unfortunately was not able to be with us today, but I will try my best to represent him today. And Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's really, truly a privilege for the AFCFTA Secretariat to co-lead with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa this week's activities of the Africa Dialogue Series. Today's dialogue, as I have mentioned, focuses on the potential of digital services trade in Africa, and looking at it from the point of view of the urgent need for regulatory frameworks that are key to maximize the potential for Africans in terms of digital services trade. I'm sure we'll all agree that Africa's digital ecosystem offers massive potential to spur economic growth, promote opportunities, and in terms of advancing social equality and also gender equality, and at the same time creating jobs for all in Africa. The acting ES has provided us with some statistics, but let me just mention that there are some estimations that digital economy could contribute to up to $180 billion a year to the African economy by 2025. And that means increasing the yearly contribution to $712 billion a year by 2050. So we see there is great potential for Africa, but how do we get there and ensure that we actually are able to do this? And there is also some research that has shown that the use of internet across the continent can also expand, and this can be at a rate as for high-income countries, and that also showed that there is potential for about creating 140 million new jobs, and this would mean having an added income for the continent of about $2.2 trillion. And so how do we get this in the going for the continent? And there is a lot that happened, of course, during the pandemic, and this accelerated African digital innovation and in so many different sectors, and also increased the demand for more digital infrastructure and services across the continent. And one key element that we are also dealing with under the digital trade protocol is how do we assist African countries to increase digital infrastructure and services across the continent in terms of capacity development, and also understanding how to take to make use of the opportunities that are being presented. But we all know that access to the internet and digital technologies in Africa is growing. However, it still lags behind the global average. And also that despite all the bold aspirations and plan to promote digital trade in Africa, the volume of digital trade is still very low in the continent if we compare it to other regions of the world. There is a study by UNCTAD in 2022 that shows that while over half the population in high-income countries shopped online in 2019, this figure was only 2% in low-income countries that include African countries. So it actually shows you how below average we still have. There are also differences among African countries in their experience in digital trade. And this is even among the largest economies in Africa. And this is in terms of GDP. These variations may also be attributed to many factors, including the non-existence of an enabling legal policy and institutional framework on digital trade, the issue of infrastructure gaps, capacity limitations, and also what we can consider to be cultural resistance to digital ways of trading. And we have a number of points that have been raised when it comes to people agreeing to really change their way of life to use digital means. However, notwithstanding the above challenges, many experts in Africa do agree that there is a huge potential to use digital trade for the benefit of the African population, provided that we then create the appropriate regulatory, legal, and institutional frameworks to be able to do that. And digital regulation can help unleash this potential in terms of digital transformation for Africa's development. And we also need to keep in track issues related to insecurity or cyber security, and avoid abuse of the use of technology in terms of when we use digital trade. So we have a lot of initiatives that are upcoming and notably important when it comes to regulating the growing power of a limited number of tech companies, the use of personal data, or fighting the spread of disinformation and cybercrimes. We also need to look at strengthening fiscal oversight to prevent the big tech giants and others from circumventing local laws and regulations, and especially tax systems in Africa. And clearly, choices that we make in this area will make major implications for the type of digital economy that emerges on the continent. And therefore, instructively, many governments and also the African Union have already adopted digital transformation strategies and implemented regulatory changes with the aim of pursuing universal digital access and encouraging private sector investment, and also looking at opening new markets and driving socioeconomic development, among other key elements that are important. Now, moving on then to issues related to the African continental free trade area, and those that have spoken before me have mentioned a few of the key elements. We see that with the operationalization of the AFCFTA, we have an important vehicle through which our African countries and member states can formulate and harmonize their digital policies and rules and cooperate to expand trade in the continent. And in this regard, under the AFCFTA, we are currently developing the AFCFTA protocol on digital trade, and it's being negotiated under the wise leadership of our chairperson, Raphael, who is with us today. And here we see that under this protocol, we can establish the requisite regulatory environment and the legal architecture for trade across the continent to further harness the opportunities in line with other continental initiatives such as the AU Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa, which seeks to build a digital single market in Africa by 2030. And the protocol also looks at supporting and taking into account the objectives of the other protocols that have already been developed under the AFCFTA. As you may be aware, this protocol and the other protocols under Phase 2, such as those of investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy, are actually meant to support and anchor the liberalization that is being done under the protocol on trading goods and trading services. And as a whole, the whole agreement together with its protocols will necessarily work in conjunction with all the other work that is being done by different institutions and partners that we work with. So therefore, a successful conclusion of the negotiations on digital trade within the AFCFTA would help to create the continental foundations and principles for future negotiations between African countries and third parties. And this is also key in terms of articulating a common African position. And in this case, the protocol would further help Africa achieve more in the negotiations that these are negotiations with third parties, and also when negotiating collectively rather than when they do it at a country basis. Therefore, our long-term goal, therefore, is to create a single and secure digital market across Africa, alongside with the free trade area that is now being created on the ground. And looking at it, this will require large investments in broadband connectivity, secure data infrastructure, and also look at the governmental and legal reforms that then can facilitate competition. And talking about financing and investment in the infrastructure, this will be vital in terms of building connectivity in the continent. And these investments then must be accompanied by policy and regulatory reforms that then create a safe and attractive environment for the private investors. Strong continent-wide cybersecurity will also be important for building trust and ensuring that Africa's digital single market works safely and securely. The AFCFTA is very committed to promote and harness the digital economy, and this is key for us in terms of it being an engine for Africa's growth and development. So more digital trade will mean more jobs for the youth, the African youth, youthful population, and also this will provide us with higher quality of life to achieve the Africa that we want. I know I've been a bit long, and I apologize, Stephen, but I felt it was important to actually point out these things. Thank you very much, and all the best with the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. I mean, you are giving us what's going on in the negotiations. It's good for the listeners to know, and also to be encouraged that we are moving towards that, finish line to get this digital protocol together with the other Women in Trade protocol. So, great. Thank you very much, Christina, Antonio, and Emily. Now we are going to go to the second part of our webinar. We were supposed to have a setting the stage by Her Excellency, our Deputy Secretary General, but for unavoidable reasons, she was not able to do that. But I have been promised that her message is also going to be part of what is going to be curated out of this session. So once you get the link, eventually, we will have her statement there. So let me go now to the panel. So we have Dr. Raphael Mezwi-Minster, the DG of the Digital Economy, Ministry of Communications and the Digital Economy from Gabon. And as you have heard, is chairing the negotiations. We also have Ms. Michelle Chivunga, the CEO and founder of Global Policy House. We have Dr. Robert Ochola, the Chief Executive Officer of Africa NENDA. We also have, I don't know whether Angela has joined. She is in now, Ms. Angela Wamola, the head of Sub-Saharan Africa GSM Association. We also have with us Mr. Lassina Kone, the Director General and CEO of Smart Africa. And last but not least, we have Ms. Tresha Mapanga, the Chief Operating Officer of AE Trade Group, who are based in Kigali. So, and I'm going to invite each one of them in that order. Now, for us to be able to get an opportunity maybe to respond to a question or two that may come from the floor, I'm going to request my panelists, rather than taking the 10 minutes we had given, we see whether you can do 8 and see whether you can keep to that. And I'm going to start with Dr. Raphael Mezwi-Minster. Just to say that if digital infrastructure is crucial to enable digital trade in Africa, having a conducive regulatory environment for digital trade is probably equally important, including ensuring that digital infrastructure can be fully utilized. So it's for this reason that the Economic Commission for Africa, as you heard from Antonio, has been collecting data throughout the continent to better understand Africa's digital trade regulatory landscape. Now that we know, and it has been said that you are directly involved in the ongoing negotiations on the digital trade protocol under the AfCFTA agreement, what do you feel are the main priorities to be considered in terms of regulatory measures to facilitate intra-African digital trade on goods and services in the AfCFTA context? And is there any experience or initiative from Gabon that you would like to share with us geared towards accelerating the country's digital transformation? The floor is yours, DG.
Merci, chers collègues, pour la parole donnée. Bonjour à tous les collègues et merci pour l'invitation à ce forum. Effectivement, comme vous venez de le dire, l'Afrique a beaucoup investi dans les infrastructures ces dernières années, mais malgré ces investissements, aujourd'hui, l'environnement réglementaire pose des freins quant aux usages de toutes ces technologies et de ces investissements. Et au même titre que la connectivité aujourd'hui, l'environnement réglementaire, les lois, pour faciliter non seulement le commerce numérique, mais les usages en général des nouvelles technologies, sont nécessaires pour notre commerce numérique en Afrique. Quelles sont donc les principales priorités à prendre en compte? Comme venait de le dire Émilie dans son introduction, l'environnement réglementaire pour améliorer le commerce numérique en Afrique nécessite pour les États d'améliorer l'environnement réglementaire. Et comme ici, il s'agit de numérique, ça veut dire que notre commerce va partir de ces formes conventionnelles habituelles sur papier vers des formats numériques. Et en premier lieu, la priorité pour les États, effectivement, de reconnaître tout ce qui est documentation numérique. Les lois devraient donc évoluer pour chaque État pour reconnaître les documents numériques, pour reconnaître l'authentification de ces documents et surtout tout ce qui est relatif aux signatures électroniques, aux sceaux électroniques, mais également à tout ce qui est au roulateur électronique. Toutes ces technologies donc devraient être intégrées et reconnues par nos États et c'est vraiment la principale priorité qui va permettre de pouvoir authentifier les documents et de permettre aux États parties d'avoir des transactions électroniques qui sont reconnues mutuellement. Le deuxième point est, comme je l'ai dit, que chaque État doit reconnaître non seulement les documents de son administration, mais également ceux existants dans le commerce, de pouvoir effectuer des échanges dans des versions électroniques de documents mutuellement reconnus par les États. Donc, nous devons faire évoluer en priorité nos lois dans ce sens-là. Et en général, dans le commerce, il y a les contrats. Ces contrats également, aujourd'hui, sont des contrats sous forme papier. Les États devraient mettre en place des règlements et des lois qui permettent de reconnaître des contrats sous forme électronique, de reconnaître les factures qui sont mises de manière électronique. Et pour cela, outre ces signatures-là, le point le plus important également, c'est l'identité. Pour pouvoir faire des transactions, il faut non seulement des usagers sur le réseau, mais également les entreprises qui sont en train de commercer. Et l'identification numérique pour l'ensemble des Africains est un enjeu. Cette identification doit s'accompagner de la possibilité des systèmes de commerce et des plateformes de pouvoir dialoguer entre elles, d'où l'impérieuse nécessité d'assurer une interopérabilité de tous ces systèmes numériques. Donc, parmi les priorités, l'interopérabilité des systèmes numériques et surtout l'identification qui permettra en fait un transfert sécurisé de tous les documents. Et ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que les documents transmis, les signatures transmises, ce sont des données. Et que ces données-là doivent être régies par des lois et des textes pour pouvoir non seulement les transférer à l'intérieur des États, mais également pouvoir les transférer d'un État à un autre. Les États devraient donc mettre en place des textes réglementaires qui permettent non seulement de transférer ces données entre pays, mais également de pouvoir les reconnaître mutuellement. Mais aussi également, ce que nous pouvons retenir comme environnement réglementaire prioritaire dans l'élaboration de notre protocole, c'est de pouvoir protéger ces données-là. Parce que la protection, c'est la confiance. Mettre ces données sur un réseau, les usagers, les entreprises doivent avoir la confiance et les États devraient pouvoir assurer la protection de ces données par des lois et par des textes. Ces protections vont jusqu'à ce qui est sécurité sur les réseaux. D'où la nécessité d'adopter des textes sur tout ce qui est cybersécurité et lutte contre contre la cybercriminalité. Tout ceci participe de la confiance dans l'usage et l'utilisation des réseaux et dans tout ce qui est protection du consommateur. Voilà en gros partager les priorités en termes de texte, mais également ce que nous pouvons rajouter comme priorité, c'est que les États devraient pouvoir à la fois mutualiser, mais partager également les infrastructures. Donc, trouver les textes, les cadres réglementaires qui permettent un partage de ces infrastructures, mais également une mutualisation dans tout ce qui est stockage de données, des échanges et la protection de ces données-là. Ce qu'il faut également rajouter, c'est de créer un cadre qui est favorable à l'innovation. Il y a Émilie qui vient de revenir là-dessus. Les données, c'est, comment je pourrais dire, c'est l'or de demain, c'est le pétrole de demain, c'est la ressource principale de demain. Mais c'est la façon d'utiliser ces données pour apporter des solutions aux problèmes qui se posent, pour faciliter le commerce, qui sera la valeur ajoutée, d'où la nécessité de pouvoir entreprendre et de faire de l'innovation. Donc l'innovation doit être mise au centre de notre protocole pour favoriser le commerce numérique en Afrique, surtout pour les jeunes entrepreneurs africains à entreprendre et tirer profit au maximum de cet environnement. Donc voilà, en gros, sur les priorités en termes réglementaires que je pourrais décliner. Reconnaître les documents sous forme de données, sous forme papier, mais sous forme numérique, pouvoir authentifier ces documents pour avoir des signatures qui sont reconnues. Et pour cela, il faut des textes également et reconnaître les technologies qui vont avec. Il faudra pouvoir stocker et protéger ces données, protéger le consommateur également pour avoir la confiance. Voilà en gros l'ensemble du cadre réglementaire sur lequel les États devraient travailler en priorité. Mais pour cela, ils devraient pouvoir également mutualiser les investissements, mutualiser les infrastructures et les partager. Et enfin, aller dans...
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Raphaël. You can
créer un
finish.
cadre réglementaire qui favorise l'innovation, s'approprier toutes ces technologies. Pour ce qui est de l'expérience du Gabon, en dehors des infrastructures que le Gabon a mises en place, comme tous les autres États, et a adhéré au principe de réseau unique, et c'est pour ça que le Gabon, qui est l'un des pays fondateurs de Smart Africa, a récemment signé son accord pour intégrer le processus de ratification de l'instauration, la création de Smart Africa est en cours au Gabon aujourd'hui. En dehors de ça, le Gabon a adopté la convention de Malabo sur la cybersécurité et la lutte contre la cybercriminalité. Tout ceci pour tout ce qui est élaboration de la confiance et pour pouvoir protéger les données. Aujourd'hui, le Gabon est doté d'une loi qui est la loi sur les transactions électroniques,
Thank you, Raphael.
qui permet d'ouvrir la voie à la...
Raphael, I don't
Yes.
want to interrupt you, but maybe if we can, I think you've given us good examples of what Gabon is doing. You've made very good points of what needs to be done, interoperability, digital identity, pooling of infrastructure resources. So maybe let's, because we are running a bit late, go to the next panelist. Maybe from a question you might be able to come back, but I think you've given us enough in terms of response to the question that I had posed to you. So if you don't mind, I can go to Michelle.
Merci.
Thank you so much. So thank you. Let's go to Michelle. So statistics from ITU indicate there are very big divides in terms of internet access in Africa. 64% of urban citizens have access to internet, but only 23% of the rural citizens are connected. Similarly, men seem to have are more connected to the internet in the continent than women at 46% against 34%. And even at the country level, we find that internet access ranges a lot from one country to another. So the core business of Global Policy House is to bridge and close the global digital finance and identity gap. And clearly the statistics that are given, it reveals that there's a lot of effort required. So can you please tell us how the Global Policy House is contributing to filling these gaps in the African context, of course, and in terms of both required investment and capacity development? So maybe also 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stefan. First and foremost, just thank you so much to the invitation to come and speak to you and address you all. It's a real pleasure to join you. Wonderful to see some very familiar friends and partners that we work with, including the CFTA. So very, very happy to be here. Your question is really timely, actually, because, most of our work really is committed to supporting many people we consider to be really left behind, or, we're seeing the gaps are starting to increase over time. And our work really, we work in the space of emerging technologies. We're looking at things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, data, IoT, and how we can really leverage technology to support communities that are not necessarily included. And for us, the digital divide really is an issue, and I think it's an issue that we can solve. And so we're quite excited about potentially leveraging one technology, but also looking at some of the policy frameworks and how we can look at the policy to actually help to improve the challenges around the digital divide. I mean, what we have, like everybody has already said, is really that a gap between what I call the data rich and the data poor. And where you have that disparity between people, where you have some communities who have access to connectivity, who have access to data, and then you have other members of society who do not have that access, is creating a very big barrier, and creating new barriers to even trade and to be able to do business. So for us at Global Policy House, we've made it a point to actually look at how we can close those divides, especially for women and young people. Now, of course, we're operating across the world, but our primary market is obviously the African continent. I'm an African girl myself, and we're very, very passionate about making sure that young women, especially, can actually contribute and take advantage of what's happening within the digital economy. So our work is really geared at supporting women, for example, to get involved into the digital economy. An example of a program that we have is the 10 Million Women Initiative that was launched last year by His Excellency Wamkele Mene, to support 10 million women to come into digital trade, support 10 million women to come into the blockchain and emerging technology space. Because what we're seeing is that big, massive gap where we have a lot of women not necessarily participating in terms of writing code, creating new products and services, but actually consuming some of the products and services. So what we want is actually to have more women participate and to actually mainstream women into the digital economy. And of course, why are we doing that? Because obviously women are playing a very critical role in terms of trade across Africa. Many of our entrepreneurs, many of our businesses are women, right? Under Secretary General really pointed out a very important point around scaling. Now, if we do not look at scaling and really supporting businesses to scale, then we're missing the trick a bit. And I think what is missing even on the continent is actually initiatives that are scalable, you know, that are able to reach many, many more people, especially, again, youth and women, of which our continent is made most of. The other area that, again, we're really looking at is around capacity building and education. So, you know, without digital literacy, we're not going to be able to take advantage of what the digital economy has to offer, to be honest. So we need to be able to actually give people the right skills. And one of our passions and our activities is actually digital skills upskilling, right? Making sure that people have the right skills for a fourth industrial revolution world, right? We need to be able to provide adequate skills around things like, you know, emerging technologies, data. How do you leverage data so that you as a business can actually start to grow and scale? So that is very important. Again, we're helping to build capacity and provide education around how you actually become more digitally literate, as well as financially literate. Again, the third point we're looking at is around investments and channeling financing. So for us, again, we're very passionate about trying to close that gap. You won't believe it, but, you know, I think only 2% of businesses who are in the digital space are actually women-led businesses. Right, only 2% of startups actually that are in the digital space have been started by women, which is a very, very low number. So we need to actually increase that number and try and scale that number. And then in terms of funding as well, we want to channel investment. So we're supporting by trying to bring more financing and investments into women-led businesses, but also into startups across Africa. What we're seeing in terms of the funding, I don't know, $6 billion went into startup funding in 2022. In Africa, but most of that money is coming from outside of Africa. It's not coming from internally within Africa. We need to create a stronger capital markets within Africa. And then we need to be able to offer more choices, right, in terms of financing for these businesses, for our businesses. And of course, the protocol is, of course, very, very beneficial, very important to enable that to happen, both the investment protocol, but also the digital trade protocol that the director, Emily, spoke about. It's very, very important that for us, I think as a business that we're providing that support role, but we're also helping to look at the implementation side of the protocol. So we want to make sure that, you know, we are building those products. We're also creating our own products using blockchain, using AI. And these products are the ones that we're going to use to bring into the market. But we have to create those products. We don't have to sit and consume products from outside. I believe that African entrepreneurs and African youth, African women should be the ones building these products, should be the ones writing the code, and we should protect that code and make sure that the IP is also protected. So those are some of the things that we are covering. And of course, the digital trade protocol, which again, we're working with the CFTA on, is very, very important for businesses like ours because it enables us to access more market, enables us to trade and do business, to export into other African markets, all the services I've talked about. So the protocol is absolutely critical for that. I hope I haven't gone over the 8 minutes. I tried to rush, but there's more I could say.
No, actually, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm actually quite excited about that 10 million women. So you're doing this with the AfCFTA Secretariat. There is a negotiations on the digital in women and youth in trade. And then you're trying to address this 2% ownership of the startups by women. I mean, it's difficult to imagine what that means. Yeah, I'm a father of 2 girls and 1 boy, so I get concerned when I hear some of these statistics. Now, let's go to Robert. Robert Ochora, the CEO of Africa Nenda. So one of the key areas of your work at Africa Nenda revolves around payment system projects. So could you please tell us about the type of support and solutions you are offering and how those may complement and facilitate the use of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, that's PAPS. And there is a high possibility that some of the participants in this webinar may be interested in getting support from you. So who are your stakeholders and how should they be reaching out to you for support? Robert.
Thank you very much. A very good morning, afternoon, and good evening to everybody. I'd like to just start by recognizing Under Secretary General, Acting Executive Secretary, and my sister from the AfCFTA. Allow me also to just take a moment to recognize my good brother, the Director General, my brother Lassina Kone, and everybody else on the panel. Very excited to be here today and continue to thank you for the collaboration and discussions that I think are very pertinent to the challenges that Africa faces. Allow me to start by painting a broad picture. Today, 400 million Africans, 60% of whom are women, continue to be financially excluded. Let me define that. That means 400 million people today are keeping their money either under their bed or in those boxes that we all know about if you come from our continent. Some of the studies that we've put in place show that if we do not do a significant impact in bringing on financial inclusion, by 2050, we would have only onboarded 140 million. That means by 2050, 250 million Africans will still be financially excluded. And I think that's a very big problem statement. So part of the issues that exist today is that we do not have enough, and I think Dr. Raphael spoke about interoperability. We do not have enough cost-effective, cross-border, and indeed in-country and cross-regional payment systems which are fully interoperable. Indeed, today, we know that there's only 26 payment solutions across the continent, which have some level of interoperability, but the challenge with those 26 that exist, only 8 of them actually are achieving the requisite volumes. And the way we did that definition, and I think we worked with UNECA on this, we worked with the World Bank on a report, we found out that if you look at the gross national income, vis-a-vis the transaction volume, only out of the 8, only 5 of them are actually achieving anything above 70% transaction volumes. So basically, you have put in place payment systems with some level of interoperability, but they're not actually achieving the requisite price points. They're not achieving the right throughput in terms of volume. So that is the problem statement. So at Africanenda, our role is to come in and provide a solution across the board, where we come in and look at what we call pre-project, where you look at the initial design, you look at the scheme, you look at participation. A lot of systems today do not actually include fintechs. Some of them are bank-led, some of them are MNO-led, and the cost implications continue to be a significant challenge. When we look at cross-border payments, which I think is what PAPS is trying to solve, and I'll come back to that, you find that to pay, if you're sending $100 from one African country to another African country, it'll cost you anything from 12% to 24%, whereas the global average is 6%. The SDGs is asking for a number that is closer to 3%. So that is the problem statement that we have today. And the reason why we're not able to solve that is because there's a lot of challenges around policy harmonization. There's a mismatch in terms of regulation. There's a mismatch in terms of the skills that we have across the continent. So you find in some areas, vendors come in and they provide vendor solutions without capacitating the solution providers, and indeed those within the countries. So what we believe as Africanenda to solve that problem is that we need to put in place efficient systems which are fully interoperable, so they achieve at least some of the requisite volumes that we're seeing in some of the systems I mentioned. Ghana is one country which has achieved the highest level of interoperability. And Nigeria, through their NIBs, they're bringing in the payment service providers through the MNOs, so they have also achieved some levels of interoperability. Kenya, of course, is mobile-led, have also achieved levels of interoperability. So we want to take the continent up to that level and also bring down the cost, both in-country, but also for cross-border payments. Once you have those systems in place, 18 markets today in Africa, I forgot to mention, do not have any systems in place. So if you were to link your cross-border, which is the PAP system, into those 18 markets, you actually don't have a place to do the integration. So part of our work is to ensure that we scale up, build platforms in those 18 markets, scale up some of the 26 markets so that when PAPS is ready to plug in, you have a completely seamless and enabling environment, so that you then have full interoperability, right cost structures, and indeed you onboard and provide financial literacy so that we can actually then move to the level and take the issue of payments, both in country and cross-border, off the table as one of the non-tariff barriers that inhibits a trade and of course slows down the issues of the AFCFTA. Allow me to then say two more things before I move to our stakeholders. We've also taken critical learnings and part of our work is to share best practice. 3 years ago, Brazil had about 30 million or 40 million people who were financially included. They rolled out, I think, what is probably the most advanced system, which they launched in 2020, called PIX. PIX onboarded 70 million people. And when you're doing person to person, it's free. They brought down the cost of merchant payments from 3% to 0.3%. They've onboarded about 11 million MSMEs, SMEs, and indeed corporates onto this platform. And we've seen a significant uptick. And these are some of the models that we're sharing with central banks. So that speaks to one of our stakeholders. So we did a 1-week training with the Central Bank of Brazil. We brought in about 15 central banks on the continent so that we can showcase that. Another example, which speaks to another stakeholder, is brought about from the example in India. And we've got some of those examples in Africa as well, but allow me just to use, for purposes of scale, India as a case study. India rolled out an interoperable platform called UPI. One of the things they did is provide an open data, open banking solution, where they provided the data to fintechs, and fintechs using that data were able to come in and design solutions that brought down the cost of working capital from 20% for small scale traders down to 3%. So these are some of the things we would like to do to ignite a digital transformation on the continent by also building solutions using African system providers, African developers. And indeed, we were on that journey. Last year, we brought in about $11 million to Rwanda and indeed to COMESA to build solutions which are going to be actually designed using local content. So the final thing I'd like to say in terms of our stakeholder universe is banks is critical, MNOs are critical, and I think we're working with the AFCFTA again on the digital trade protocol because we believe that the cloud infrastructure needs to be hub and spoke. We think as a continent, we don't have enough money to build 54, what we call tier 4 data centers, each one costing between $10 to $20 million. So we think we need to have hub and spoke, and therefore the framework around data sovereignty, data privacy, data passporting needs to consider that so that you almost have a hub and spoke and allow customers, technology providers, banks, MNOs to host their solutions on the cloud, of course, with all the right protocols, and we get efficiencies for scale. I'll stop there. Again, thank you for this opportunity. I hope I've not gone beyond my 8 minutes. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Robert. This is also much exciting. You revisit the issue of pooling infrastructure in terms of the data center so that we don't have to spend a lot of money. You also talk about lowering the cost, because I think one of the complaints as an African citizen, besides being a UN employee, one of the things I've seen is that citizens are still complaining about the cost of transactions or the cost of doing things using fintech. So it's good to hear the best practices that African Nenda is trying to bring in from Brazil and also from India, if they can help us. And yeah, so thank you so much, Robert, for your intervention. So let me go to Angela, Ms. Angela Wamola from GSM Africa. I'll start by citing some statistics from ITU 2022 figures, which say that when combining fixed and mobile internet networks, Africa is not performing very well, with only 40% of its population having access to the internet against 60% of the world population. However, this of course hides the fact that Africa does relatively better on mobile internet alone. According to your own recent statistics at DSNA, 2/3 of the world transactions using mobile devices were made in Africa. Again, some link with what African Nenda talked about, which is impressive. So, according to you, what are the main drivers highest major share of Africa in global transactions made worldwide through mobile phones? And could you also clarify whether these transactions were concentrated in a few African countries and which ones, or they are well spread over the continent? So again, 7 minutes.
Thank you so much for that, and greetings to everybody, my fellow partners who are passionate about Africa and moving the needle further. So yes, the statistics that you've mentioned are correct. From a mobile internet adoption, we are not doing well. And when you talk about mobile internet, you're looking at broadband services. So any service that's running on 3G, 4G, and today on 5G. The rest of the world is doing very well, and we are behind. And the statistics are not even looking better when you look at Africa being a youthful continent, average age being 19. You can't even measure us on the adult population. You need to measure us on the youthful, the teenage statistics, and that looks at 22%, which is basically a quarter of our population in Africa, have used mobile internet. That is very bad in this day and age where everybody is using the internet, and we all understand the criticality of that. So we need to make sure that we can get everyone using mobile internet, because we are leaving almost 80% of our population behind. That's critical. But when you look at mobile money services, then now that's a different conversation altogether. Why? That's exactly where you said where over 2/3 of the transactions of mobile money are from the continent of Africa. Now let me put that into context. That means that out of 65 billion transactions globally, Africa handles 45 billion. Out of 315 live services globally, with 1.6 billion accounts, Africa has 53% of those. That's 166 live services and 781 million accounts. 50% of all mobile money accounts are in Africa. We are the hotbed of fintech. We need to be proud of that. And that gives us a very good story. And the story is that we understand the relevance and the utility for technology. We are an unbanked population, and we have found relevance with the technology on mobile money. Now, this is where the difference comes in terms of the two statistics of the internet and the mobile money sort of being ahead of the curve. One of the key drivers of this is that not only is it that we are an unbanked population, but because of the prevalence of the mobile network coverage in Africa, with only less than, we're about 17% now of Africa is not covered. But this means that what we have done is that mobile money services are technology agnostic. What do I mean by that? It means that they work on even older technologies such as 2G. We see that mobile money works on SMS and USSD, which is a 2G technology. And then we have all these apps built on 3G and beyond. M-Pesa Africa have built their app, VodaPay, Momo, everybody has an app which is good. But as we know in Africa, because many of us are using internet, the apps won't work for those who are not using the internet because you need an app. So that's one of the things that's driving the key. And therefore, we need to think ahead and figure out how we can bring the rest of the 80% of our population who are not using the internet to move to the apps. Because where the apps are is where now you can grow your services beyond just person-to-person payment. This is where now the digital economy starts to play in. When we talk about the Africa we want, and bringing Africa to have a single digital market, it means then we need to enter the mobile internet. This is what we need to do to make sure that we can bring as many people of our people to begin to use the applications that sit on mobile apps that are making our lives easier. This month, I think many of you saw the bold step that the Central Bank of Kenya took in creating the innovative and regulatory environment that is encouraging merchant payments through the Kenya QR code that they launched. Immediately during that launch, you saw M-Pesa announce that they have a QR code for business owners, and now they can make payments across all their apps. It doesn't matter. So what they launched was Scan Ulipe, meaning scan to pay. The next step for us in Africa is now to enable cross-border payments so that the border traders do not have to worry about which mobile money payment provider will move my money to my bank account. That's not their headache. We need to make things easy for our merchants, and that will unlock the opportunities for for Africa. In 2022, here's a staggering statistic for you. We saw bank to mobile interoperable transactions grow by 36% year on year. And then mobile to bank payments grew by 47% 1 year. What are we saying? Fast growing interoperable transactions are driving Africa, the industry of the trade in Africa. You will see that also mobile money remains the key savings channel for our citizens. In 2021, over half of the people of the mobile money providers did not offer mobile money savings solutions in their apps. Now, in 2022, 60% of all the merchants, of all the mobile money providers were offering savings account. And now the World Bank's Findex shows that 39% of all mobile money account holders have savings accounts. This is driving a new culture in the region. So I think, in short, what we're saying is that a lot of the things that are driving the solutions around Africa becoming digital and realizing the Africa single digital market are driven by making sure that we can move our people from the 2G services where they are constrained to SMS and USSD, and therefore will be limited in the kind of solutions that they'll offer. And even as we've heard, the rest of the world is shutting down 2G services, which means that we no longer have an option. We are now basically on life support on 2G. We need to make sure that all our people, the 80% who are not going to mobile internet and therefore not having mobile apps, mobile money apps, are not left behind. Because if they've been left behind, then we have another solution, another challenge for us. And the solution for this is making sure that we get the smartphones into the hands of our people, because that's what they're telling us. 75% are telling us that they don't have smartphones in their hands. They are not affordable. So I think we have to work towards leaving no one offline so that we don't leave anyone behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that's a call to action, Angela. And also with the interesting statistics that you've given, showing that Africa really can lead the world, and we are there, but there are things we need to do. And that's why it's good that Lassina from Smart Africa is coming in here. Lassina, if I'm not mistaken, the Smart Africa Manifesto, which was endorsed by the heads of state and government in Kigali in 2013, that's 10 years ago, is what guides your work at Smart Africa. Among others, promoting affordable and quality information and communication technologies, as we have heard from Angela, is at the heart of Smart Africa Manifesto, or Angela's call. Those are certainly key priorities to ensure wider access to internet and increase Africa's digital trade. What is your assessment, Lassina, of where we currently stand in terms of affordability and quality of ICT in Africa, and what is needed moving forward? And two, considering the ongoing work on the continent on trade and services, including the AfCFTA protocols on trade in services and on digital trade, how do you envision the role of the Smart Africa Alliance in accelerating digital service trade throughout the continent? So you have the floor, Lassina.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for inviting me, Excellencies, Christina, the UN Undersecretary, and fellow partners, GSMA, Africa NENDA, CFTA, our twin brothers organization, but one is 10 years older than the other one. That's not exactly what Wamkele said, His Excellency. Yeah, to piggyback, in fact, it's a nice fit in what all of my colleagues here were saying, from Africa NENDA, from even Gabon to GSMA. Let's talk about affordability. Today, we all know affordability is really a very important issue, but you see, it's very tricky. I'm speaking here under the control of GSMA, who has a lot of data. With Africa being connected, look at the cocktail. She said, in terms of mobile money, fintech, we are leading the world. In terms of internet penetration, we are lagging the world. So look at the cocktail. It basically means it boils down to what we all refer to usage gap. The usage gap means we have infrastructure in area covering our populations, but the population infrastructure for data and voice, but the population are using USSD, SMS, and they're not using the internet. It boils down to four things. Affordability. When we want to talk about affordability, today people tend to say, oh no, these other operators are very expensive and so on and so forth. No, you have to look at affordability very carefully. What are those operators' interests in increasing the price in the rural area? Of course, affordability should also be related to the taxes the government actually charge. Because remember, if you put together the entire satellite capacity around the planet, the entire submarine cable around the planet, the entire fiber optic around the planet, it covered 96% of the Earth's surface in terms of population. So why are we trailing? Affordability is one. Two, local content. You see, USSD, you don't see any operator in any villages doing advertising, come use fintech or Momo or M-Pesa or whatever. No, because USSD, it was actually a response to a basic need that our grandmothers in the villages, in the rural area and urban area knew. Until today, we're controlling 495 billion transaction value dollars per year in Africa. It means people are using mobile technology, but they're not using the internet. Affordability is one. Local context. Give my grandmother an application in her local context. My grandmother, she's not going to go on the internet because of the Facebook or WhatsApp. Even if it's a WhatsApp, make it an African WhatsApp. Give her a reason to use it. Three, I think Angela, my sister, mentioned it, which is affordability of the devices. The devices are too expensive. As she said, we are on the lifeline of the 2G. The whole world is actually shutting down the GSM now. Everyone is moving to LTE. What are we going to do about the smart devices cost? You can say, okay, you can get a smart device today for, I don't know, $50. It might be easy for you and I. But someone who's living on an average of $1 a day, $50 can be something. So what are we going to do about that? If you look at Africa, don't look at it in the age with the eye of Kenya, 48 million, Rwanda, 12 million, Ghana, 30 million, 1.4 billion population. We are still consuming smart devices coming from outside. It's a fundamental question. So we became typically a big market for the world. Number four, which is a cybersecurity. It is a cybersecurity hygiene. We're talking transforming Africa into a single digital market by 2030. It means anything you and I do today on a day-to-day basis has to go digital. So who is the guardian? People need to know if using a technology, mobile technology, it means there are certain procedures, there are certain hygiene you need to know before we actually move forward in to be able to use those technology. These are the four key, the usage gap blocking today. It's affordability, local context, which is local content, smart devices cost, and the cybersecurity, which is basically really a trust. Do I trust the technology to carry my data? Now, coming back to the digital protocol, considering the ongoing work on the continent for the trade. The mission statement of Smart Africa itself, as I said, is to drive Africa's digital transformation agenda through a bold and innovative multi-stakeholder approach. As such, our contribution is very clear. We support the acceleration. Who says acceleration is exactly opposite of deceleration? It means also acceleration means pragmatism of digital services, trade, and digital transformation. So in collaboration with our sister organizations, twin sister organization, ACFTA, Smart Africa is creating an environment where digital services and trade can boom across Africa. And to piggyback on what the Director General of the IC Digital Economy in Gabon was saying, yes, we must carry our identity digitally, but it's very important if you want to act as a one market that our digital identity should be interoperable. And that's what Smart Africa launched, what we call SATA, Smart Africa Trust Alliance. So our role is to provide technical expertise to ACFTA committee on the digital trade, and Smart Africa is helping to ensure that the AFCFTA digital protocol is developed and implemented effectively, facilitating digital trade across Africa. Also, part of our role in the digital trade protocol is to provide a coordination and cooperation mechanism. No single organization can do this alone. Such as Smart Africa Trust Alliance, for example, which is a cross-border data flow, digital identity system, digital services. So we are helping to create a right foundation for the growth of digital trade. And you will come back, I think I like to quote what the ACFC said, the intra-trade in Africa represent only 18%, while in the EU represents 69 to 70%. Why? Because we don't trust each other. Let's say the fact we do not trust, we have no mechanism of trusting each other. And Smart Africa Trust Alliance is about that. So through initiatives such as the Smart Africa Digital Academy as well, I think another panelist was talking about capacity building. In order to transform, you have to be informed. Even the 4 challenges I mentioned in the area of the usage gap, maybe part of the local content is because our people living in the rural area or the urban area, they're not really literate. They don't know They don't know what's really technology. So Smart Africa, we developed a digital skills and capacity platform called Smart Africa Trust Alliance. In the past 18 months, we started with the decision makers, because most of the time, all of us here, when we are working with our ministers, our head of the state, our decision makers, we assume they understand the language we're talking about. So we started with the decision makers. We trained so far more than 3,500 from 29 different countries. Today, SATA, Smart Africa Digital Academy, is implemented in about 12 countries and growing. So THRO also is focused on affordability, access, and usage of ICT. Smart Africa is creating an environment where digital services can thrive. This includes promoting policies and agile policy regulation. There's a new terminology. We have to move away from collecting to be enabling in terms of regulatory environment. It's very different. Collecting is the traditional regulations. Enabling, it is a new regulation for development. That is very important. We also engage with the World Bank by training our regulatory bodies and how to make an agile policy. I'll give you a very example to make it in plain English.
And then we will conclude with that.
New technology comes into any country. The first thing regulatory said, no. I think we all believe that if M-Pesa had to wait for Kenyan regulatory environment to give them a green head, it will never see the light.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I happen to have been in Nairobi when this was starting. So you have had Professor Juguna Ndongo talk about it. That time I was privy also to how that final decision came about. So it's quite interesting what you have stated there. So now, this is the manifesto. I think you've read the manifesto and what you're doing to achieve the manifesto. And I think how it is complementing what the AFCFTA Secretariat is doing.
Yes.
And now we have Treasure here, who not only is trying to optimize on the utilization of the AFCFTA, now that we have rules, but also to do this digitally. The CEO of AE Trade Group. So Treasure, my sister, Africa has the youngest population in the world, yes. With many of them being under the age of 25. Such a high number, as we have had, presents an opportunity for the continent, including for digital trade. They also have a strong potential for innovation, but efforts are also required to prepare them for jobs around digitalization. And I think we have had some of the panelists talk about it. At the AE Trade Group, you are strongly emphasizing inclusivity and supporting SMEs to take advantage of the digital transformation. So could you please elaborate on the products and services you offer at AE Trade and how they help bring young entrepreneurs into the digital trade sphere? And again, 7 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just honor this distinguished panel and also the eminent speakers, and thank you very much, distinguished moderator. The AE Trade Group, as you have said, is working, focusing on a group that everybody has talked about today, micro, small and medium-sized enterprises as the entry point towards ensuring that all the work that's being done at the level of the African Continental Free Trade Area on setting up the rules takes into account their specific needs and challenges, because we need to ensure that we move forward together. Your question is specific to the youth, and what's great about this particular demographic is not only just its size, but also the enormous pool of talent and creativity that it harnesses. So what I want to just, the way I want to approach it is to say that the AE Trade Group started its journey when it went into the market with coming up with a platform called Sokoku.Africa. Basically a digital capacity building machine. That's how we look at it, because it is not just an ordinary marketplace for buying and selling. We started from the premise of saying, let's understand what are the real chronic issues that we need to address in a scalable way to make a difference, to ensure that we get this digital and financial inclusion that we're all talking about. So what we basically found are the three chronic areas was the know-how to do business, and a lot is being done to capacitate businesses. But our niche and focus is the area of mindset, because what makes the small businesses vulnerable, unable to grow, unable to get access to finance, essentially is the survival mentality, which they haven't selected for themselves. They have found themselves channeled by circumstances, and we need to find a way to assist to create an enabling environment to get out of that vulnerability that they're placed in. So in that area, we have a learning platform, a digitally delivered called Changing the Mindset to be competitive. And this is just one area that we are working. And of course, we welcome partnerships as well to augment the range of learning material that they can access on the platform. The second, access to affordable finance, has been talked about today. And we know that the enormous contribution that data can make for the vetting process, for the provision of appropriate finance, because we are talking here, when we talk about this demographic, from the micro, the really small that are looking for $100, financing for working capital, for example, to 50,000 up to, 500,000 for investment in plant and equipment as they are growing and scaling. So using the digital partnership, the platforms and partnerships partnerships that we have basically set ourselves up to make a contribution in this space. We started with advocacy at the level of the African Union. We talked to the Commission and worked with ministers of finance and basically took a concept of smart finance and digital banking for their approval, which has resulted in a summit decision. What that does is that it basically enables our work with our partners, because it is basically doing the work that Africanenda and many other partners are already doing that they talked about on this platform today, and that is accelerate the digital and financial inclusion uptake in the continent, finding those options in various tools. So we have a modality called the multi-payment gateway that we have come up with, where we believe that any consumer of services should have choice as to how they want to settle their payments, whether it's mobile payments, wallets, whether cards we know are very, very rare on the continent, but they should have the suite of options. But what is the challenge with this? Everybody's talked about affordability, but I think the key point I want to underscore is the ability of the regulatory environment to respond fast enough and to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that we see the AFCFTA opening up. And I'm not sure how this will be done, but I think, when it comes to especially the payments landscape, a question I'm having, not being close to the actual drafting of the document, is how will e-payments be looked at vis-a-vis e-commerce? Because, when you're looking at the practical environment of running e-commerce, the two binding constraints are basically the payments, and the other is the logistics. And these are all services that are delivered digitally, that are actually also presumably handled in the Trade in Services Protocol. And I think from the private sector perspective, I think there's a need for us to have a better sense of what is the policy thinking, what is the logic that is being pursued, so that when the regulations come up, they actually speak to some of the innovations and the initiatives that are taking place on the continent, so as not to stunt and pull back the innovation, but to rather capacitate and enable it. So I think this is one point that I wanted to make. Now, moving forward to the logistics, because I think that's another area that is extremely important. We see this as an area that is going to grow phenomenally, and we are looking at the challenges of moving goods now in the AFCFTA and seeing the high cost of doing that, and looking at what are the different partnerships that can be forged in order to ensure that we can aggregate products for small businesses from different countries, and also supply potentially third countries. And you can only do that if you have the partnerships, the systems, and also platforms that can do that. So Cuckoo is also working with partners to be able to solve the challenge that we are facing in terms of just the sheer volume of products that small businesses are creating. Now, for the young people, there are so many opportunities. There are opportunities in fintech, in the payments space that Michelle has very eloquently described. But there are also opportunities in the area of logistics. I mean, why is Africa not growing its own logistics giants? Why is it when you scan and you look for African logistics companies, you have to scratch your head when we have in every single city a teeming number of people in logistics? They're on bikes. They're on bicycles, they are, on trucks, they are on all modes of transport. So we think that as we think about this sector and how to develop it, we really need to come together to create an enabling environment with governments that will assist these companies to formalize and to have incentives to be able to basically provide guaranteed services to their clients in order to improve the market. Now, I want to just maybe end on this point, because I recognize recognize that I won't have time to say everything I wanted to say, and that is to talk about the power of research and innovation for SMEs. You know, when you look across the continent, there is so much research that's being done on small businesses. It is really mind-boggling. Research is being done at borders every day about the, you know, informal sector, the businesses that are moving across. But the question you have to ask yourself is, where does all that data go? How does it help the woman who is sitting at a border and wants to be able to build a business that is more competitive? Where does she harness the data analytics and the information to be able to boost her business and grow and be eligible for finance because she has a business plan that makes sense? So this is the critical gap that I think we need to address. And we are basically working in a regional hub configuration to set up research and innovation centers that will capacitate and enable the entrepreneurs themselves, because we think that this has been neglected. Last but not least, the AFCFTA is a rules-based governance system. Now, as we are talking about e-commerce and we're talking about the small business that is a B2B transaction that we're facilitating between, say, you know, Kenya and Egypt, for example, what happens when there is a dispute about that particular transaction? How are we looking at e-dispute settlement from a continental perspective, from a harmonized approach? We have at the A-Trade Group set up our own system. We believe that there is a lot of work coming for lawyers, mediators, to work in basically resolving differences with goods that are moving digitally. But we'd like to see how the policymakers are thinking about this, because the dispute settlement mechanisms in the AFCFTA are state-to-state disputes. They are not talking about the private sector, and they are certainly not talking about the clients that I'm serving every day that may not be literate, that don't have access to, they're living on the edge, they need things to move quickly. And the difference in terms of getting the turnaround on that particular sale could be the difference whether they have food on the table or not, and if they're able to produce and manufacture for the next day. So I want to just end there and to say thank you so much for this platform and the conversation. I've learned a lot, but I'm hoping that, you know, this will continue, and from discussion to action, because that's really what we're about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Treasure. Really, there is actually not a better place to add this, because you also take us back to what was said earlier by Raphael, the question of digital identity. So this question of trust on who you are trading with electronically, it comes back to that. If we don't know who you are dealing with, then it becomes very difficult even for you to know where to start the dispute. So digital identity, interoperability of these digital identity systems, I think becomes very, 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 very important. So we had up to this, we have gone overboard by 5 minutes. I'm not going to say that we take Q&A. I think some of the questions that had been raised on the platform were answered subsequently in some of the in the following up panelists. And I think I would be unfair to think that you can actually summarize this into one call to action, because almost every intervention to me was actually a call to action or a call to a specific policy issue that needs addressing. So I want to thank you very much for the wealth of experience and insights that you've given us. I think the co-organizers are going to make this webinar available electronically. So I'm sure it's going to get a lot of hits because I think we should figure a way, our communication team should figure a way of making sure that people key in to what you have said, because I think there were a lot of gems and a lot of proposals that were there. So maybe I pass it back to one of the principals. Maybe Christina, maybe you can close it for us, and then we end it here in a minute. I know you did not expect this, but we can't hear you.
Yes, 1 minute. in my remarks, you cut me on 3 minutes, but the other open remarks, you gave them more time. You know, I'm very small country. I'm from Cape Verde Islands. We small countries, we are very, very, how can I say, we very pay attention to big countries, huh? Otherwise, we are not seen in the picture. I'm from Cape Verde Islands, my dear brother Stefan. Thank you. I will take 1 minute. First, for me was clear. I have been African policymaker in the past 30 years. What I saw in this conversation, of course, everybody talks about digital divide. What I saw in this conversation was a pace divide, clearly. There are some African entities that are moving at 200 kilometers an hour. And where are these African entities? Civil society and private sector. Public powers, public policymakers are lagging behind. And down the road, this might be a bottleneck, but more, it might be a risk. And I go what Corné said, and I refer in my opening remarks. If the policymakers don't push themselves forward to keep with the pace of civil society and private sector, Africa down the road will be just one more market. This process needs to be, yes, I agree, internally driven, but policy powers, public powers, they have a strong role to play. Second, that I would like to mention, there is also a divide. I see that private sector is grabbing at all levels, is grabbing digital economy as a driver, What we see on the policy making, I'm asking myself, if private sector has been able to deliver what you said on our right hand, when I look at my left hand, what I see, 600 million people without electricity. Can we bring this digital driven force to education, to health, to basic things? Because why I'm bringing this to our conversation? Because we reach a stage in Africa that in some zones of Africa, the lack of providing social services and public goods has been feeding instability. This brings me to another issue. Instability in Africa, if we squeeze the lemon, is the absence of the state. Can we use digital solutions, scale up digital solutions to help African states to be there for their populations, to deliver social services, to deliver public goods, and start fighting back instability? My third thought, and is regarding financing. We have lots of good stories I saw in this conversation, and this is my last comment, sir. A lot of good stories. My question is, what you need to go from a set of successful stories to evolve to a massive change at the continental level? What you need? And there, I believe, we need to address our financing paradox. And I will close with these numbers that I have been repeating in the past couple of months. Unless we change the paradigm of our financing for development, we make it internal driven, we stop losing 77 billion of inefficient public spending, 88 billion in illicit financial flows, 46 billion in tax inefficiency, and we stop keeping $1.3 trillion of pension funds outside Africa, and we move these financial resources to feed our Agenda 2063, I don't think we'll be able to drive the process and to avoid to be a market. Back to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much. With that, I bring this to an end, and I want to thank our co-organizers and you, Christina, Antonio, and Emily, and of course our panelists and also our participants. It has been a great afternoon here in Juba listening to you, and I hope it was also a great afternoon and morning wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings
so
from
much.
Dakar, Senegal.
Thank you.
Greetings from Kigali.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see you.
Bye, Treasure.
See you, Treasure.
Bye. Nice
Bye,
to see you.
Michelle. Okay, bye.